for Christ. We also want to let you know about all of the ministry opportunities that you have here at 3C. So men, we have our Iron Man Fellowship where iron sharpens iron. Ladies, we have our Women of All Colors ministry, which is an opportunity for our ladies to connect and get closer and build closer fellowships and friendships. We have our marriage ministry, which is Happily Ever After, right? I like to call it the marriage gym, where we get together and we work on building that happily ever after marriage that we're looking for. And then, of course, we have our ARC Financial Institute, which is our personal finance ministry. God's principles of personal finance is what we teach through the ARC Financial Institute. So we want to encourage you to plug in. We want to encourage you to take some time and get to know us in those areas. We want to give you an opportunity to do that here in just a few minutes. Today we're going to run about an hour, but we always make room for the Holy Spirit to visit with us. If it's your first time with us on YouTube, we're going to ask you to hit the subscribe button. We want to thank all of our YouTube subscribers for joining us on today. If this is your first time with us on Facebook, we're going to ask you to hit the like button, turn on notifications on the church's page. And we're also going to ask that you shout out your family. You know, let us know you're there. Give us an opportunity to say hello and connect with you. If you wanted to move into the next step, you're ready to move into the next phase. God is telling you that you need to grow and develop. And 3C is the place where he's leading you. And you just want to get some more information before you fully commit. What we're going to do is ask you to connect with us by texting the word welcome. Text the word welcome to 804-925-1466. Text welcome to 804-925-1466. What's going to happen is you're going to get a Connect card. It's going to ask you for 2 additional pieces of information. First, going to ask you for your name, because we want to do life better together with you. Second, it's going to ask you for your email address. So that way we can keep you up to date and fully connected with all of the things that are going to go on here at Community Christian Center. So we also want to remind you and invite you, let you know we are still actually having service physically here in the building. So we want to invite you out tomorrow morning, 10:15. We are socially distancing and we are going to take your temperature. So church starts at 10:30, but we want you here at 10:15 and come on and fellowship with us as we lift up the name of Jesus. But this morning, we are kicking off the Renew You session for 2021. The team is here. They're excited, well prepared, and looking forward to helping you mature through life's moments. We introduced them to you all last month, but I'll rattle off the full contacts, and we're going to give you an opportunity to connect with the team at the end of today's broadcast. But we're going to kick off this morning with Professor Paul. He's going to come and share some ideas and some strategies and some concepts. We have counselors in the building. We have spiritual leaders in the building. We have support group members in the building. We have people here ready to help assist you in fulfilling that motto, right? Life is better when we do it together. And so this morning, we want to do life better together with you. So I'm going to give it over to Professor Paul, and we're working on that other one. We're going to get over to Professor Paul, and we're going to let him kick off our Renew You session for this morning. Everybody, welcome, Professor Paul.
God bless you. As usual, it is a privilege to be back before you again. Before I move on, I want to kind of give a shout out to my partners in ministry, Sister Nicole Gore, her husband, Rod Gore. There are going to be some others joining us as well. We find out that 2 are better than 1, the Bible says. A 3-band strand cord is not easily broken, and so the more the merrier. We're in the Renew series, and the whole purpose of the Renew series is teaching us how to mature through life's moments. If we can go to that next slide, I want to go through what we're going to go through today. In other words, I want to recap on the mission statement. But as we get into everything, I want to talk about the dynamic relationship between thought, emotion, and behavior, and the corruption that has the ability to happen if you don't be careful. We're also going to learn how to renew our mind. In other words, we're going to walk through the process of how to change our minds. We're going to look at 4 ways to deal with problems without resorting to violence. We're going to learn how to keep our cool in this whole process. We're going to end it with what I'm going to call an admission of guilt. In other words, we're going to take a look at ourselves and see if this applies to us. And we'll do a little review. We'll take some questions. And then at that point, we will be finished for the morning. So let's go to that next slide. This slide reminds us that this is the foundation for what we do, okay? Romans 12:2, and it simply says, "And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." In other words, the entire foundation of what we are attempting to do is the transformation process of our mind. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow process, but it's a sure process still the same. Let's go to that next slide. I wanted to remind us of the hierarchy of needs, because where we're going to be operating this morning is, you've got the physiological, the safety. Where we're going to be operating at is love and belonging and self-esteem. The way the hierarchy works is, what we recognize is, man has a tendency not to be able to move forward with certain things unless certain more important needs are taken care of first. Once my physiological needs are taken care of, once my safety needs are taken care of, I got a roof over my head, I've got food to eat, things like that. Now I want to make sure that I'm connecting with the tribe. Not only do I want to connect with the tribe, but this is the time where I also build self-esteem. So everything that we're looking at right here operates right there in that area. So let's look at that next slide. How thinking affects behavior. There was a 90s show that I used to love to watch. I know I'm dating myself. Family Ties. On Family Ties, there was Steve Urkel. And Steve Urkel was famous for one line. When he messed up something, he would go, "Did I do that?" And that's what we want to learn how to do, as we want to begin to ask that question, did I do that? So, on the next slide, the Bible declares, "For as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." In other words, that's giving us already preparation for the fact that my thinking is ultimately going to dictate how I behave. That's Proverbs 23:7. So on that next slide, let's look at this. This is probably one of my more favorite graphics here. What this shows us is that relationship that I've been talking about between thought, feeling, and behavior. Thought, feeling, and behavior. In other words, I get a thought in my head right there at the top of the triangle. From there, my thought will generate a feeling. So here's an important note to understand about this. We generally cannot control our feelings. What I feel is what I feel. If I'm angry, okay, and Pastor Joel says don't be angry, I'm probably going to become more pissed, okay? Because I typically cannot, not by thought, control my emotion in the moment itself, okay? But if I can learn to get a hold of the thoughts that are causing me to feel that way, now I can start to get a feeling on my, I can get a handle on my feelings themselves. So you got that relationship that you see there, thought, feelings, thought, feelings. It's a dynamic relationship. I'm going to date myself again. There was this group back in the 80s, early 90s, called Public Enemy. And in Public Enemy was a dude with a big old clock. Flavor Flav. You know what I'm talking about. And so Flavor Flav's job was one thing, and that was to co-sign on what the leader was saying. If Chuck D, as the leader, said, fight the power, Flavor Flav's job was, yeah, boy. He was the hype man. And so that's the relationship between your thoughts and your feelings. I could go, thought, I don't think Tima likes me. Feeling, yeah, did you see the way she looked at you? Thought, yeah, something, I knew I shouldn't have came to this church. Feeling, I don't like this place at all. Thought, I don't like anybody in the place. Feeling, thought, feeling, thought, feeling, thought. Then boom, behavior. Before you know it, I'm taking action on something that I talked myself into. Now, what's interesting is once the behavior happens, it reinforces the original thought. If whatever I did brought me some type of temporary relief, temporary pleasure, it sends a message back to my thought process and said, hey, I don't know what you did, but it worked. Do it again. It is also the foundation for addiction. In other words, when we add alcohol into the mix, when we add gambling into the mix, when we add substance abuse into the mix, pornography, any of these things, what happens is there's a temporary relief that happens, okay? A reward, we tend to say. Once that reward happens, the reward, the behavior, tells your thoughts, hey, whatever you did, do that again because it's working. The brain is always looking for the next thing to put on autopilot. And I don't want to get caught up in this, but when you think about how toddlers actually learn how to walk, when the baby is somewhere around 1 year old, we take great pleasure in propping them up against a chair. And this is a momentous occasion because the baby any moment is going to take these steps. And the baby takes a step and falls, boom. And parents go pick them up, sister, brother, pick them up, prop them back up. And the baby takes 1 or 2 steps, boom, and falls. And we prop him back up. And the baby's trying to walk. And the baby takes 1, 2, maybe 3 steps this time, but falls, boom. But it's not long before we're watching the baby to see if the baby's going to fall before we're going, hey, get out of that. Move, get down from there. Stop, get out of there. Only takes a few months. And the baby has entered in on autopilot. In other words, we don't communicate with our legs to say, take me somewhere. It's automatic. And if we do something long enough, and it doesn't take long at all, eventually our brain process is going to say, okay, I got you. I'm going to put that on autopilot. And from then out, it's going to do it automatically. Let's go to that next slide. So we're going to look at something called cognitive distortions. Big word and little meaning. In other words, when we talk about cognitive distortions, go on to the next slide. We call them cognitive distortions because they have the ability to distort our thinking, okay? Now, we're going to use a process called REBT. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but this is a process that we typically use when we are prepared to challenge what it is we are thinking. So the elements of REBT are simple. In other words, we have to understand what rational means. In other words, rational simply means that it's reasonable, it's logical, okay? When we think rational, we respond rationally, okay? We make rational decisions. And as a result, life in general is better, okay? The E in REBT stands for emotive. In other words, it's the emotional part. That's the understanding that, guess what? Our emotions are affected by things that have happened to us over the course of our lives. What's interesting is that in any given situation, we don't respond according to what's happening in the moment. We respond according to what happened to us in the past. If someone yells at me, and at 10 years old, 11 years old, all I can remember is my father yelling at me, I instantly go back there, unconsciously. And in my mind, I cower a little bit. We respond according to what happened to us in the past. The B simply means behavior, okay? In other words, it's going to get reinforced, okay, based on what we think and what we feel. And the T, yeah, is for therapy, but it's also for teaching or even training. The reason why I bring this up is what is great about REBT is it's not one of those techniques that a therapist uses. It's something people learn how to do. We simply teach them how to do it. That's it, okay? Let's go to the next slide. So when we look at cognitive distortions, okay, we understand that cognitions have to do with our ability to think, reason, apply logic, things like that. And when we talk about the word distortion, watch this. Distortion also has to do with providing misleading or false information. So in psychology, one of the things that we recognize it for is the source of irrational thoughts. It's important to know now that it is the irrational thoughts, okay, that typically take us to those dark places within our lives. Let's go on to the next one. So we're going to look at a few different types of what we call cognitive distortions. This is where Urkel kicks in. You have to ask yourself, do I do that? So the first one is called all or nothing thinking. In other words, we see things in black and white terms, okay? If you're not 15 minutes early, then you're late. Well, technically, no, I'm not. But if I'm looking at it in black and white terms, that's the way I see it. It's either black, it's either white. It's either up, it's either down. It's this or that. And so what that begins to do for us is it places us in this mindset of rigidity, if you will. So the next one, emotional thinking, this happens when, based on what we feel, we think the outcome of the situation should come based on the way that we feel. In other words, we're looking at it emotionally, okay? The important thing to know here is that our feelings can play tricks on us. And so what happens is it sends us the wrong message. The next one is musts, shoulds, and oughts. Anytime you say that phrase or anytime you use any of these words, begin to challenge yourself. My wife hates when I say this. She'll say, okay, hey, we need to do this today. And I look at her and say, we don't have to. And she goes, you know what I mean. And that's us playing with each other. But the bottom line is, try it. How many things are there that you say you must do or that you must not do that really doesn't fall into that category at all? Okay? Typically, these are unwritten rules, and I got to be honest, in many cases, they come from childhood. They come from adolescence, the introduction of all of these rules. And what happens is as we come into adulthood, we don't rethink them. We use them because that's the way it's always been. It must be this way. It should be this way. It ought to be this way. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, okay? You must be crazy. Let's go to that next one. Self-blame. This is a huge cognitive distortion because people who typically use self-blame, what they're doing is they're taking situations that in most cases had nothing to do with them or they had no control over, and they're taking responsibility for it. And so what this does is this constantly puts that person into a mode of they're a failure because they're taking on things that weren't theirs to take on in the first place. Anybody got a tendency to expect the worst? I don't care if the sun's shining and everybody's out and everything's going well. In your mind, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're waiting for something bad to happen. And so we have to learn to challenge that, okay? Overgeneralization. With overgeneralization, this is a situation where if we observe something happens once, we think that it applies to everything. If it happens once, if I was riding with a buddy of mine and we got into a car accident and he was driving, does that make him a bad driver? Not necessarily. Well, you know, he did run into the back of that car. Yeah, but has it happened before? What's his driving record been like up to this point? Okay? Overgeneralization. In other words, if it happened once, I'm going to generally apply it to everything without examining the facts. And go to that last slide. There are a lot of cognitive distortions. I'm only going through a few of them to give you an example of what it is we're talking about. So, assuming, mind reading, jumping to conclusion. This one doesn't need an introduction because we observe it all the time. The question is, do we do it? Am I doing that? Am I jumping to conclusions? Am I making assumptions based on little or no proof? Okay? Fairy tale fantasy. You'll observe this one in people, and I have a little joke to tell about that one. The fairy tale fantasy has to do with, if anything, whatever the desire I thought should have happened for my life, if it hasn't happened, then my thought process is, life's not fair. Life's not fair, okay? It is this type of thinking that actually leads to that privilege mindset. I am entitled to this. I should have this. I am owed this. And so, yeah, it's a cognitive distortion. It'll cause your thinking to be wrong. Catastrophizing. This is a big one in substance abuse, addictions counseling. In other words, the tendency to take any small thing and it's the end of the world. I had a client, he didn't lose his cell phone. His wife was going to bring it to him. But he was upset like he lost a dear friend. He was losing his mind. Catastrophizing. Am I blowing things on a regular basis? Am I blowing things out of proportion? Okay? And finally, discounting the positive. So it was interesting. We're always looking for the worst thing to happen. In discounting the positive, when something good actually happens, okay, what we do is we put down the positive aspects about it. It wasn't that good. No, it was actually very good. It might not have been perfect. Few things are, okay? But we immediately begin putting down the positive aspects of anything that has happened. So that's just a few cognitive distortions. Go to that next slide, if you would, Ty. The reason why I want to talk about, or I wanted to talk about cognitive distortions, is that they lead to, watch this, irrational thinking. So now the groundwork has been laid for your thinking to be all twisted up. What's interesting is if you look up the word distorted, twisted is actually one of the words that is used in the definition. And so you'll hear that phrase on the street often. Don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted. It means you're taking the facts and you're replacing it with things that aren't true. Don't get it twisted. Okay? So it's important to know that when we talk about cognitive distortions, irrational thinking is going to produce some things in us. Okay? It's going to produce demandingness. We're going to have a tendency to want to demand all of these things from people. It makes us inflexible. In other words, if it isn't exactly the way I think it's supposed to be, I've got a problem. I'm inflexible. I'm rigid. It also produces this whole catastrophizing that I was talking about. We call it awfulizing. Everything is awful, ain't it awful? Okay, my job, it's awful. Let me tell you about it. Hour later, I'm still talking about how awful it is. You could leave the job, just so you know. But that's a whole nother story. Awfulizing. I can't stand it. This is just horrible. Okay? So these are just a few things. But one of the major things here is low frustration tolerance. In other words, when I lose the ability to cope with frustrating things that are going on, I'm headed to a dark place. In other words, I now have a low tolerance for frustration. This is typically what happens when I need to go and take a drink. With alcoholics, you'll hear them talk about the fact that the alcohol takes the edge off. Yeah, it does. Because I don't handle frustration very well. And so I need something to calm my anxiety as a result. Let's go to that next slide. The next slide is just a little cycle, okay, that we have a tendency to go through when these cognitive distortions become very big in our life. So we have something called a trigger event. A trigger event is something that happens, okay? Could be an event at work. It could be something that happened at home. It could be something that happened at church, but something happened, okay? And so what happens is we form a judgment based on, okay, what has happened to us in the past, okay? And then we get this judgment, this belief in our head, okay? From there, if you follow the cycle, that results in what? Angry thoughts. Now I'm angry, okay? Something happened. I remembered all of this bad stuff that happened to me in the past, and now angry thoughts are ruling my brain, okay? Feelings of anger, followed by angry behavior, okay? And these things have the ability to manifest themselves in the body as well. Let's go to the next slide. So let's look at the process of what it takes to actually renew our mind. In other words, we want to put an end to the corruption, okay? Now, I said it before, I'll say it again. There are no shortcuts. In fact, you'll also hear me say this: we got to do the work. Up to this point, if we're experiencing some of these things, it's because at some point we failed to do the work. We're not blaming it on anybody. We're not blaming it on you. But sometimes it's difficult to take a look at ourselves and be able to come up with this. So, go to that next slide. Here's some things that we need to look at to help us through the process. If I'm going to change, I need to look at unconditional self-acceptance, problems and all. Sometimes this is the very thing that keeps us from being able to change. In other words, there's this thing about me. It may not be public. It may be very private that nobody else knows. But because of it, it causes me not to accept myself. I'm a failure. I'm bad. And that's where guilt and shame comes from. These are debilitating. Guilt says I did something wrong, but shame says I am something wrong. Okay? And so we have to begin the process of self-acceptance, unconditional. Okay? What's interesting is that all of this is biblically based. Okay? Second, we rate your behavior, not yourself. In other words, okay, I did something wrong. I can correct that. I can fix that. I can make the decision not to do it anymore. Okay? Love the sinner, hate the sin. Okay? Unconditional acceptance of others. Ooh, this is pretty big. Love your neighbor as yourself. The problem is, if I don't love me, I can't love you. But pay attention to this when you have interactions with people. You'll know who loves themselves because they extend love to you. If you're having difficulty extending love to other people, I'm going to tell you to begin to take a look at if you have that love for yourself. I'll tell you what does it, okay? Let me hit this last one. Rate what others do, but not them. What this has a tendency to do is it has a tendency to make us want to compare ourselves to other people. That's the beginning of the end, okay? Man, I wish I could be more like Brother Joe, okay? I wish I could be more like Sister Nicole, okay? I wish I could be more like Pastor Flight. And so now that this comparison, it's almost like a hamster wheel. Once I get on that hamster wheel, it never ends. It never ends. Let me talk about the ladies for a minute, okay? It's not often I get on the ladies, but I'm going to have fun with it. You're the worst. Now, I got to be honest. Guys got problems too. We're better at hiding it. Okay? I got to give the sisters props because they at least acknowledge, yeah, I got a problem with that. I need to fix it. Okay? But we do this whole comparison thing. It starts sometimes early in life, somewhere around middle school. Okay? It may start with a mother simply saying, hey, you know, be careful what you eat. You're going to get fat. You don't want to eat this. You don't want to eat that. Now I'm at school and I'm comparing myself to the other girls. Now I'm starting to develop a body image. Before you know it, I've got all of these other problems that are stacked on top of that. And it's a vicious hamster wheel because once you get on, it's difficult getting off. Comparing ourselves to other people. God says that he has fearfully and wonderfully made us unique. There is no one else like me. No one. I got a couple of brothers that might look like me. I got a couple of children that kind of resemble me, but they're not me. I have to learn how to operate and walk in my uniqueness. Curves and all. I had a true story. I had a 7th grade teacher. I came up to ask her something. She said, and don't you laugh. She said, Paul, you got hips like a girl. And just as sure as I'm 55 years old, I still remember that. Don't get on that hamster wheel. Don't compare yourself to others. What's interesting is in that comparative process, what you'll find is some of the biggest stars, I'll use Beyonce, body image issue. Everybody experiences it. We have to learn to love ourselves. Okay. I thought this was a good thought. There is nothing either good or bad. It comes from William Shakespeare, from Hamlet. There's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Now, let that marinate for a minute. Thinking makes it so. The only value that an event, a person, place, or thing has is what I assign to it. Now, if Pastor were here, he'd go, if you misdefine, you misassign, okay? There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. If I say I'm fat, I'm fat. If I say I'm dumb. If I say I'm a failure, I'm a failure. Because I've assigned the label to me. Sometimes I assign it because other people have influenced it. We need to begin working on that. So let's go to that next slide. What do we got here? We talked a little bit about this already. So there are some ABCs of changing, okay? Number one, we have to understand what an activating event is. An activating event is something that happens that triggers an emotion in you, usually negative. When you walk away from a person and you go, I can't stand them, you've been triggered, okay? If somebody just playing with you raises their hand and you do this, you've been triggered. And so an activating event is anything that happens that triggers you, okay? Now, usually what happens is we jump straight to C, okay? In other words, there's usually a consequence, a behavioral or an emotional response, okay? What I want to do, what I want to show you is that it doesn't have to be, but in order to do this, we have to learn how to slow down. Huge problem for me. Go, 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 go. But we have to learn how to slow down, because I've talked about it before, and I'll talk about it just a little bit here as well, and that is there's these two major portions of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in the decision making, and then the limbic system, which is based solely in emotion. Everything that has ever happened to me is stored there. When it becomes triggered, it shuts down my logic. And now I'm in react mode. In order to be able to get to the point where I can do something about this, I've got a short window of opportunity. But I have to be able to stop. I have to be able to breathe. I have to give myself a moment. Okay, you're going to be okay. Take a minute. This is usually where something bad would happen. And there's a whole process involved through breathing. It's interesting that, God, you are the air I breathe. I mean, the mere fact that I'm breathing, there's this nerve on the side of my neck called the vagus nerve. And that vagus nerve is activated when I breathe. The job of the vagus nerve is to turn off my sympathetic system. My sympathetic system puts me here emotionally, mentally. I dare you to say something, because whatever you say, I'm ready for it. My parasympathetic system says, hey, it's just Sister Nicole. Relax. And so what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to take that precious moment and breathe. Because through breathing, it has a biological effect and will begin to calm you. So we've got activating event. In other words, something happened. Usually we jump straight to a behavioral response, okay? But what we really need to understand is I didn't go straight to the response. I have a belief about what happened. And that's what I need to challenge. That's what I need to begin to examine, okay? Somebody yells at me. I get upset. But the fact of the matter is, I need to ask myself, why did they? Why might they have yelled at me? Why did them yelling at me affect me the way it did? My father used to yell at me. My mother used to yell at me. I may even respond emotionally if somebody yells at me, and I may say, "You're not my father." Of course, they're looking like, oh, what does your father have anything to do with this? Because that's where my mind went. And so that's where I need to examine that belief. Activating event, I need to examine what is my belief about that event. And then I can look at consequence and emotional response. So go to that next slide, if you would. Our next job becomes to learn how to dispute the irrational belief. Dispute it, okay? That's going to be tough, okay? But you have to remember what's on the line when you attempt to dispute an irrational belief. You have to remember, okay, I've been angry all of my life. I've had irritability issues all of my life. I've had this rigidness, this inflexibility all of my life. I've seemed to have been miserable my entire life. I've had a self-defeating type attitude all my life. And then finally, there's dysfunction all of my life. All because I haven't disputed what it is I'm thinking. You have no idea how many people I talk to about coming to church who say something like, there's a bunch of hypocrites up in there. And, I usually tell them, yeah, you're right. And there's room for one more. They have these thoughts. They have these preconceived notions about what they think is going on up in here. As a matter of fact, this is largely why we change the way we do things, so that we can dispel those myths. So, we're looking at being able to dispute the irrational belief. And we have to remember, this is an opportunity for me to begin to chip away at the anger, to chip away at the irritability, to chip away at misery, self-defeat, dysfunction. I have an opportunity to chip away at it, but I've got to dispute what just happened in order to begin that process. Okay? Go to the next slide, if you would. Here's how you dispute it. Simple process. You're going to ask yourself some questions. Okay? Is it true? Okay? Is whatever you're dealing with, is it true? Is the information you are receiving, is it true? A lot of times, especially when we think about the fact that the Bible talks about itching ears, itching ears, itching ears. If you're not careful, Facebook will put you into this mode because there's story after story, video clip after video clip of something that has been unverified. You don't know if it's true or not, but there it is. And of course, many of us go, well, if it's on Facebook, it must be true. Is it true? How can I know that it's absolutely true? These are the questions I have to learn to ask myself. Is it true? How can I know that it's absolutely true? If I can't absolutely know that it's true, should I believe it? And what goes with that is, what are the consequences of me believing it or not? I can't do this if my mind is racing. The window of opportunity is very short because my brain, the autopilot, wants to kick back in. I remember, I keep dating myself. Back in the, I would watch wrestling way back in the 70s, and they would do something called tag team. And there would always be somebody on the side while the other wrestler was in the ring fighting. But the person on the side wanted to help, but they had to be tagged in. So the person on the other side is just sitting there, come on, tag me in, you know. My auto process for my brain is waiting to come back online. And so I've got a small window of opportunity. Breathe. Is it true? How can I know it's true? And so from there, go to that next slide. We're going to learn how to exchange it for what we're going to call some rational coping statements, okay? These are about us. We're talking to ourselves. What that means is that we got to be honest, brutally honest. I noticed that I struggle with fill in the blank. I noticed that I struggle with speaking in front of people. I notice I struggle with getting angry when people raise their voice. Whatever that blank is for you, fill it in. Next, even though I struggle with getting angry, depressive thoughts, anxious thoughts, I am still worthy of love, worthy of respect. I am still a good person. In spite of these things, even though I struggle with fill in the blank, drinking, pornography, I am still worthy of love. I probably need to finish this before I say this because I got a tendency to get off track. But I just happen to believe that that is at the core of what has failed to happen in America, is that conversation hasn't taken place. In order for that conversation to take place, I've got to resolve some of my own issues. It doesn't mean I have to fix them. It means I just got to acknowledge them and start the process. I got a buddy at my job, and he and I remember we were kind of going back and forth way back before Trump was elected, and we were just kind of going back and forth about thoughts about, some of the things he said and things like that. And something wonderful happened. We had a minute where we had to spend maybe an hour and a half together driving. And he's white and I'm black, but we both laid it out. One of the things I told him is that, I'm anxious a little bit because at the time I was like 51, 52. I'm anxious because at 52, when the police go by, I still look in the rearview mirror to see if they're coming for me. And I've done nothing wrong. And being able to be vulnerable in a moment like that caused him to understand where I was coming from. And now there's understanding why I may say some of the things I say. But it also opens the door so that we can discuss just a little bit more. Next statement says, in the future, when someone yells at me, when I am frustrated, okay, I will try to breathe. I will try to not take it personally. I will try to, in other words, whatever positive thing you can insert here that helps you to move forward from the activating event that caused you an emotional upset. Lastly, I will be patient with myself while I work on this. if I start working on this today, I may not see results for years. Years. I love this scripture. We glory in our tribulation. Our tribulation brings patience. Our patience brings hope, brings character. Character brings hope, and hope does not disappoint us. We glory in our tribulation. Glory, glory. What is that? Well, we're supposed to be excited about it. Excited about what? Well, tribulation. Well, what is tribulation? That's when stuff goes wrong. So I'm supposed to be happy, excited about when stuff goes wrong. Let me ask you a question. If everything went right, would you need patience? No. I need it when it goes wrong. And so I glory in the tribulation. Tribulation builds patience. Patience builds character. Each time I go through an activating event, each time my mother-in-law, and I know my mother-in-law doesn't do this, she loves me, but each time my mother-in-law, my father-in-law says something negative about me, and I'm able to sit with the emotion. I'm able to not resort to doing something that will be a negative to me. It's almost as if God rewards me with a little bit of patience. Not a lot. Because he says, come back next week. I want you to learn some more. Okay? Because if I gave it all to you right now, you might run off. I'll never see you again. So I'm just going to give you a little bit. And so I go through another tribulation. Boop. I made it through. I didn't cuss nobody out. I didn't hit nobody in the throat. Okay? I didn't drink. I didn't do any of those things. Okay? I sat, I processed it, and sometimes it's with tears in my eyes. But I learned to do that. My reward, boop, a little more patience. And what I find is that patience, boop, character, boop, patience, boop, character, boop, patience, boop, character, boop. And so 5 years from now, I know it seems like a long time, that patience that also built character has also now built hope. There was a time where, I think in my early 40s, I couldn't buy a new car. I couldn't. It wasn't because I couldn't afford it. That may have been part of it. But I hadn't got to the point where I was paying bills where people could trust me. Until one by one, he started building my patience. Character, pay the bill, patience. Character, pay the bill, patience. Character, pay the bill, patience. Character. And believe it or not, there's still a part of me that when I get paid goes, man, I could go and buy this and do that and get crazy with it. Patience, character, patience, character. Now what I do is a night before, I've got them all loaded up in my phone before my pay even hits. Every single bill, I'm going through it and I pay it. Every single one. There was a time I wasn't like that, okay? But that process had to be built. So it doesn't come automatically. All right, let's look at the next slide. I better speed up here. Two schools of thought. Rational school of thought. The irrational school of thought. Go to the next slide. So the thing about the irrational school of thought, I want you to start at the bottom. Irrational thoughts lead to irrational beliefs. Irrational beliefs lead to irrational coping statements. Let me try to make that make sense a little bit. If I have an irrational thought, I don't think nobody up in there likes me. I develop an irrational belief. Everybody in church is a hypocrite. From that irrational belief, I've got to soothe myself somehow and convince myself that what I now believe is okay. And so I develop an irrational coping statement. Okay? Well, I'm better off without them. That's my coping statement. I'm better off without them. But what that leads to is my inability to make effective decisions, because now everything that I'm doing is based off erroneous information that I have not verified. And finally, it leads me to irrational behavior. And I hope I'm not ruffling any feathers when I say this, but yeah, it leads to, hey, let's go storm the White House. I have to keep my thoughts under control. Rational school of thought. Easy. Go to that next one. But when you build rational thoughts, rational beliefs, rational coping statements, okay? I may not be good at this yet, but I'm getting better. Rational decision making. I've learned how to slow the process down so that my limbic system can de-escalate and my prefrontal cortex can come back online. And what that leads to is rational behavior. So go to the next slide. I'm gonna move through these very quickly here. 4 ways to deal with problems without without losing your cool. We're gonna call it the SCAN method. Ty, are we able to play that video? It's a short video. If you can't, don't worry about it, because it's that short. And so that's good. Sometimes we feel like that, and if we don't get it under control, these are some things that can happen, even if they're only within our mind. So it's crazy, right? All right, so in that next one, 4 ways to deal with problems. Number 1, you can solve the problem, okay? We talk about this, you can Google this and you'll get pretty much the same thing, okay? In other words, to solve the problem, identify the problem, generate some solutions, choose the best solution, implement the solution. The reason why I put the man there is because, fellas, this is us typically. Oh yeah, let's just solve the problem. If my wife comes home and says, you know, I got a problem, da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, why don't you just do this? Well, no, that one was, well, why don't you just do that? Well, no, da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, let's go to the next slide, okay? Typically, what our wives want us to do, our girlfriends, they want us to listen. It took me a long time to learn that, to listen. So, the second way is to change how you view the problem. This is where it gets difficult, okay? We have to learn to get outside of our head. There's a technique that is used in mindfulness where we learn what I just talked about, and then we learn to become the observer of our thoughts. It's almost like watching TV. I'm now watching my thoughts on a big screen, okay? I'm outside of my head looking at my thoughts. What it does is it gives you new knowledge, new perspective, a change of heart. It's interesting because when we work with trauma victims, domestic abuse, rape, what helps them is slowly, very slowly, to help them change their view of what happened to them. This is not brainwashing. What happens is they learn ultimately that it was the other person who has the problem. And we slowly teach them how to relive their lives again without carrying the burden of the other person's problem. We change how we view the problem. Go to that next one. Now, you can solve the problem, you can change your view of the problem, or guess what? You can accept the problem for what it is. We call this radical acceptance. What that means is that it is what it is. Now, I'm making it sound simple. Many people struggle with this. The saying that we grew up on, there's no sense in, fussing about spilt milk. That milk will not pick itself up off the floor. The glass will not unbreak. It won't. It is what it is. Matthew 6:27, that's where Jesus simply says, can any of you, by thought, add a day to your life? You can't. And so we begin the process of letting it go. Go to that next slide. The serenity prayer is something that's used in the recovery realm hugely, serenity, God grant me the serenity, Three things you're getting out of this: serenity, courage, and wisdom. In other words, God, give me peace, What is he giving me peace about? The things that I cannot change, Accept the things that I cannot change. To change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two. That's what we're talking about. The application of wisdom. But I can't apply wisdom if my brain is moving too fast. I got to slow it down so that wisdom can find its way in there. Go to that next slide. We're almost done here. Acceptance means giving up all hope for a better past. Sometimes we act like that. Sometimes we act like if I stay angry long enough, if I stay mad long enough, the past will change. No, it won't. And so acceptance has to do with me giving up hope for a better past. Go to the next one. I stuck this in here only so that you can see that often anger, emotions, period, they have an effect on the body. They have an effect on the body. Anger can weaken the liver. Grief weakens the lungs. Worry weakens the stomach. Stress weakens the heart and the brain. Fear weakens the kidneys. All of this is happening without your knowledge, without your permission. All right, let's go to that next one. And of course, the last one is simple, You can do nothing. But you need to understand what happens when you do nothing, Basically, what you're saying is, in any given situation, if you've decided to do nothing, guess what? I'm making a choice to stay miserable, Not only am I making a choice to stay miserable, but after I do this a few times, it becomes habit forming. Anything that I repeat, my brain's going to put it on autopilot. My brain's going to say, I notice you didn't address that problem, you didn't address that problem, you didn't address that problem, you didn't address that problem. And so it sounds like you don't want to address no problems. Boom, I got you. And it's on autopilot now. It's habit forming. This is what we refer to when we talk about learned helplessness. I'm not just helpless. I taught myself how to become helpless. Fortunately, we can unteach that. It impacts all parts of our lives from now to the day we die if we don't do something about it. And it perpetuates that cycle of anger. I forgot about this one. Albert Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. Let's go to that next slide, Ty. Actually, you can skip that one and go to the next one. So we're at the end, and essentially what I want to say is the admission of guilt is this. Did any of this apply to you? Did any of it apply to you? Have you noticed that any of these things, yeah, I got a tendency to kind of have an all or nothing attitude. I got a tendency to be emotional in my reasoning. You know, well, that's not fair. Does any of these things apply to you? And I say that because in order for them to work, you have to look inward. You have to be truthful. And you begin the slow process of beginning to change the way I think, and the slow process of the relationship to my emotions, and the slow process to my emotions, to my behavior. If I don't change it, it stays the same. But if I start the process, if I begin to question these things, the process begins to change. Go to that last slide. We're just looking at the review now. And so, what do we talk about? We talked about the relationship between thought, emotions, and behavior. We talked about cognitive distortions. In other words, how our thoughts have the ability to get corrupted. It's a very slow process. I wish I'd have got the scripture. I'm not even going to go there. But there's a scripture that supports that. That would have been wonderful. We learned the process of renewing our mind, okay, using REBT, okay? We learned what an activating event was. We learned that instead of jumping straight to the emotional response, now I need to evaluate what I believe about what just happened. We learned 4 ways to deal with problems without losing your cool. And we are at the admission of guilt. And so go to that next slide. I want to remind you one more time that as we look at this hierarchy of needs, the thought behind the hierarchy of needs is that I have to solve the things at the bottom in order to move to the top, okay? In other words, I cannot become all that I can be if I'm worried about food, if I'm worried about water, okay? If I'm worried about my health. I cannot become all I can be if I don't have a roof over my head, okay? I cannot become all I can be if I don't have that sense somewhere that I belong, okay? That someone loves me, there's a group of people that love me, and I belong there. When those things are addressed, now my self-esteem, okay, becomes heightened. And now I'm on the path to what we call self-actualization. In other words, I'm empowered now. I can change things, okay? I can stand up for things because all of my other needs have been met. Any questions before I leave you? I know that was a long one, so forgive me.
I don't think we have any questions in the house.
Well, then I want to thank everybody for having me, okay? You heard the man. You got to come on up. Beautiful.
Thank you, Brother Paul. Excellent job, excellent information. I took lots of notes. Again, just to remind you all that the purpose of Renew You is to provide us with some strategies so that we can mature through life's moments. We know that we are going to deal with those challenging situations, so this is really like some foundation so that we can be better prepared, better equipped when those moments come so that we won't respond in an irrational manner. So we are also making sure that we try to include some resources that can be of support to you in the community. Are they on our website yet, Pastor Joel? Okay, so we will be adding these to our website, but just 2 I want to share with you right now. So one of the things that Brother Paul talked about was Maslow hierarchy of needs. And we have to be able to first have those basic needs, that food, clothing, and shelter, our physiological needs. So you can dial 211, or you can look at the website 211virginia.org. They will provide you with some resources to help you meet those basic human needs, where you can find maybe some support paying for your utility bills, how you can find out where those food closets are, where those food shelters are. I mean, what did I say? Food closets, as well as clothing closets in our community. And also there are physical and mental health resources on this website as well. But if you currently have a loved one who is experiencing some type of crisis, you can always reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That number is 1-800-273-8255. And for those who prefer to connect more locally, you can reach out to one of our community service boards. If you're in Henrico County, Chesterfield, or Richmond City, really any county, there's a different connection number for each of those. Richmond Behavioral Health Authority main line is 804-819-4000. 804-819-4000. And in Henrico County, that number is 804-727-8500. Thank you. And like Pastor Paul, see, Joel done started some up here. As Brother Paul said, again, really, this is so you can have some information, a bank, that storage there, so that if you or a loved one are in crisis, we can provide them that support to get them to the appropriate help that they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Nicole. Thank you, Brother Paul. We really appreciate you having that opportunity to share from your hearts and to share some information that we can use to move ourselves forward. We want to give you an opportunity to connect with the team. If you missed those telephone numbers that Sister Nicole gave out, or if you want to connect with the team and ask for more detailed questions, or you want to get some more detailed information, we want to give you a chance to do that right now. All you need to do is text the word renew. That's renew, RENEW, to 804-925-1466. That's renew, 804-925-1466. Now, when you do that, you're going to get a Connect card. It's going to ask you for 2 additional pieces of information. It's going to ask you for your name, so we can do life better with you. And it's going to ask you for your email address, so we can send you an email and we can correspond back and forth with you that way. So we want to make sure you have an opportunity to do that. Once again, it's renew, 804-925-1466. You'll also get information about the next time we're going to meet and all of the things that are on the schedule coming forward, so you can keep up to date and make sure that you get all the help and the support that you need. The next topic is going to be one of my personal favorite topics, is how to change other people, right? So you want to make sure that you're in the loop, and so you're getting connected, so you'll make sure that you have the date and the time for when we're going to talk about fixing other people. So we want to invite you out to that. And lastly, we of course want to invite you back out tomorrow morning. Service starts at 10:15. We're going to open up the doors. Service starts at 10:30. We're going to open up the doors at 10:15 right here at 2213 National Street. We invite you to come and be in the building with us, or join us again on our Facebook Lives and our YouTube Lives, because life is better when we do it together. Before we fully close out this session, we always want to make sure we give you an opportunity to sow. And I specifically want you to understand that faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So it's an opportunity to sow. Here at 3C, we are actively involved in trying to help our partners grow and develop, and the resources that we receive from partners like you that help us accomplish that, help us do more, add more, and grow more, and serve more people. So we want to give you a chance to sow some seed on today. The telephone number is 804-409-8687. That's 804-409-8687. Simply sow whatever dollar amount that you like. We generally ask for $30 if that fits into your parameters. You're going to get an electronic receipt that will allow you to keep track of all your giving to us. We are a 501c3 organization, so it's completely tax deductible. We thank you so much for connecting with us. We thank you so much for spending time with us. We thank you for investing in renewing you. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning. Peace.
continue this journey. We invite you to consider 3C as the church to connect with. You can connect with us in a couple of ways. You can connect with us out on our website, www.your3c.com. You can connect with us through social media, or you can simply text the word welcome to 804-925-1466. Our motto here at 3C is life is better when we do it together. Listen, I want to ask you to consider helping us accomplish the vision that God has given to us by simply sowing a financial gift into our ministry. Hey, listen, we promise that we're a ministry of integrity. We're putting the monies together to do the work in our community. Here's a couple of ways that you can give. Again, you can go right out to our website, www.your3c.com. Click on giving. You can give your gift that way, or you can actually text your gift in. You can text 804-409-8687. Make your financial gift there. You'll get receipts immediately. Again, we're a ministry above board, doing things in a good, godly manner. So we invite you to connect. We invite you to give. We invite you to come visit us live. If you think it's good via live stream, you should come check out the whole service. So we hope to meet you real soon. You can visit us on our Henrico campus at 2213 National Street, Henrico, Virginia 23231. Remember, life is better when we do it together. Peace.